Hello, welcome back to another episode of Somewhere Between a Film and TV podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Parra, and number one, thank you so much for listening and watching. Number two, if you could please down below, like, comment, and subscribe. What did you think of Good Luck, Have Fun, Don't Die? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Or are you somewhere between on it? And I will say this movie is going under the radar, so just right now, I loved it a lot. Please see it. I really highly recommend it. I do think that it is very much worth your time. This is a spoiler review, however, so I obviously haven't heard a whole lot of people talking about this, especially not in spoilers, so please come back. Again, I highly recommend. I want to know what you guys think of it. Let's talk about it. Gore Verbinski is, I think, one of the best modern directors of all time. If you really look at his filmography, it is the first three Pirates of the Caribbean movies, Rango, A Cure for Wellness, and what else did he do? Mouse Hunt is pretty good, or Mouse Hunt, right? Or Mouse Trap, all great. And I thought that, and The Ring as well. I missed his directorial style a lot. You can usually tell whenever he's around because he mixes like 5 different genres together. Sure enough, does that again here. And he cannot help but lean into some really heavy horror imagery sometimes, which he does again here. But what is this about? Claiming to be from the future, a man takes hostages at a Los Angeles diner to recruit unlikely heroes to help him save the world. And this is Sam Rockwell, Haley Richardson, Juno Temple, Zazie Beetz, Michael Pena, and so many other people. I thought, like I said, that this was fantastic. I think that this was an incredibly timely movie that has a lot to say. It's also very funny. It's not preachy, but it has a lot to say, particularly in our dynamic with Claude and ChatGPT and Sora and any of the AI. It's really about brain rot as well, which I found really surprising. You would think that that's kind of a couple years old now, but I'm very curious as to when the writing process for this started, just because of its prevalence and how much it seems really urgent. And the movie itself seems like it's very urgent, like a calling card for a world that already knows that it's too late, even in the context of the movie itself. But selling that to you, it kind of makes it sound like this movie's preachy, but really it isn't. It's really, really dynamic and fun and absurdly funny and has a really interesting dark humor about itself. But let's get into the positives first. I always bring this up. I love how this looks. I thought that it was a mixture of really fun, kind of a play on how AI looks, because we'll get into the third act of that later, but there's some really interesting imagery in terms of the early on. There's like a brainwashing thing with this like brain rot, this like TikTok thing that they're looking at. And it's just these AI videos over and over that you would see now. Look at the Nutter Butter TikTok account right now, and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. This is not far off in what that really looks like. And it's so interesting to me that, sure, this could probably be accused of like the old man yells at cloud for kids and your cell phones, but it also seems really ear to the ground in terms of how that relationship is. I will tell you guys, if you don't know this, I am a high school teacher, so I know that relationship with phones and with social media and how that looks. Those videos are really not far off. And the way people play with AI, the way people are like, oh, it's not a big deal, it's just this thing, but it is obviously harmful to the earth, it's harmful to creativity and art and all of these things. And the movie itself seems like it is calling this out. I think that it made me wonder, I was like, are these videos in this, are they AI generated, or are these animators that have to make it look AI generated? It was just really fascinating to me if they did have to really go back and replicate that in an authentic way. But I really, really liked how this messed around with AI as a concept and the dangers of it, and how the movie itself seems to try and pitch like maybe we can have a working relationship with it and not rely on it entirely up until its ending. And it kind of makes you wonder, okay, so it's like either burn it all to the ground or nothing, or like we'll be taken over completely, which is a really interesting take on this. And I wish that this movie would have been marketed a little bit better, just because it is so timely and feels so much like an urgent calling signal in terms of doing something about AI, but it's also, again, I want to emphasize just how much fun this is. I really love when a movie breaks structure, narrative structure. I loved Weapons from last year. I loved Barbarian from a couple years ago. Funny enough, those two examples are by the same director, but Gore Verbinski himself. The Pirates movies, if you look at them, the first three, I think are masterpieces. I grew up with them. I watched them recently. Sure, it could be nostalgia, but I think that genuinely his ability to weave a lack of structure in terms of coordinated chaos is incomprehensible to me, just in terms of writing. And the fact that he's able to pitch this to people and get his stuff made is unbelievable to me. Maybe it's why he was away for a while, because he was like, I need to make this and I need somebody to greenlight it for me. And it's this way that the story plays out. It plays out in a very forward fashion, but has these integrated flashbacks, and how these flashbacks, how these people came to be where they are in that diner that night, that they have to go on this quest, and what their relationship with technology is. And I think that that's brilliant, because it ends up adding this, how technology and AI can affect different people in different ways. Obviously, Michael Peña's and Zazie Beetz was really like prevalent to me in particular. That first day he has as a substitute teacher reminded me a lot of the first day I ever had as a school teacher. You're kind of like, okay, so do we have this relationship with our phones? And there's a way to do it, I think, that could have been, if this movie was dumber, it could have been very like, I get it. Like, I get it, man. Like, people shouldn't be on their phones. But the way that this does it is so absurdist, is so, they make them literal zombies. They're like literal, like brainwashed. They cannot function without it. And there is a thing that they do that ties into a separate story that I found unbelievably clever and a really dark piece of humor. But I think I can put this in here and say this without YouTube being like, oh, let's take this video down. Part of this has to do with the relevance of school shootings in schools. It's actually a crucial component to the movie itself. It's almost like a secondary thing that it's about. And you don't know what's really happening here, but the kids act really weird. They act like not people. They act like bots. And sure enough, later on in the movie, but we find out they drop this piece of foreshadowing that is unbelievably funny, especially after the payoff of it in retrospect, where they're passing notes back and forth in class, and it's this advertisement for Doritos, and it's like, have you tried I think it's like spicy Southwest Doritos? They are amazing. And then Michael Peña's character is like, they are advertising to each other. Like, this is literally an advertisement. And while they're having this conversation, this guy, they hear the alarm go off, and he's like, what's that? And he's like, oh, it's another school shooting. And then it pans to them like kept in this room, and none of them have any kind of like urgency or care. And you're like, ah, that's so weird. But it's also, unfortunately, a few years in the future, you can see that really being like, oh, great, here we go. And I think that there's a really dark thing to be said about that, like how that is important as well. And it feels like this movie ends up being a bit more universal, not just about technology, but about the way that the American school system treats schools and how they treat this dynamic in particular. And I found it really, really interesting just as a concept. And it turns out later in Juno Temple's backstory, which I found unbelievably moving in a certain extent, was this, it reminded me of, I think I've gone on record on here, I'm not the biggest fan of Black Mirror, but I like Black Mirror as a concept. And I think that it reminded me of this a bit, where she takes this card she gets, and she takes it to this place, and it says again. You're kind of like, what is this? But the kids are like blurred out, and their faces are blurred. And it ends up being that you can clone your kid to a certain extent. And you can also start changing it up a little bit, things about them, but she kind of goes back on that because she doesn't want to have this relationship where she actually changes what her son is like. And it ends up being like not him, but a representation of him. And this whole thing about the cloning part of it, I found really interesting, because in the near future, I know that we can clone dogs right now, I'm pretty sure. But in the near future, you can see this being a thing. It's why they're so casual about it, because there's like this mom group that's like practically, they act like this weird like PTA where they're like, oh, first time, let's come back tomorrow. She'll be better tomorrow. And then there's this other group, this other couple that are like, oh, is it your first time having your kid killed? And they're like, oh yeah, we have had ours happen a few separate times, and the most recent time we kind of got funny with it. We made her a little bit racist. We made her Muslim, and you're like, what is like what is going on? And it ends up being just this commentary on like, well, would parents, if they had this ability to compensate for this, how far would they go? What would they change about their kids if they possibly could? And one of the funniest things about it to me is that they integrate an ad once a day into the kids. They have to pitch an ad, and her son keeps pitching this like, what, blackberry tea, something to that effect. And he's like, oh, I would love some more of that. And he ends up acting like a robot. And it's just so fascinating to me, because if this were all possible, if just for the sake of a day, you could just see an ad, let's say, for example, now, let's say that global warming gets worse, and it will. Let's say that the compromise is, in order for it to get better, we have to put an ad up into the sky once a day that's like Coca-Cola, and we have to use it with drones. I'm thinking that because I saw that a couple months ago. But you'd be like, yeah, okay. And then that would just be advertised to us. It's just a really interesting thing to pitch. And I found it unbelievably clever and smart. And I thought that could have been a movie all on its own. I would have watched that. But that being interwoven into the more modern story with even the future, it mixes this like dystopian sci-fi thing, but then an even further dystopian sci-fi bit where Haley Lou Richardson's character also has a really interesting backstory to me, where she's allergic to technology, quite literally. She's allergic to Wi-Fi and technology, and that's why she does kids' birthdays, because kids aren't on their phones. But then she notices as the birthday progresses, that as they progress throughout the years or the months or however long she's doing this, that the kids are more and more on their phones, and she ends up like, the joke's funny, but she ends up like bleeding all over this girl's cake, and they freak out, and she ends up losing her fiance boyfriend to technology, because he gets this VR headset that's sent kind of out of nowhere. And he says that at the beginning, he used to not believe in phones, is basically what he says. But it ends up being this thing of like losing yourself within that, and that he's going to go live in this video game world, like Ready Player One, essentially. And then ties into this earlier thing. The way that this movie's structured is like, it could have so easily gone off the rails, I feel, and it never does. It's handled with such a grace and such a care that is really hard to do, I think. And the respect that kind of goes into the storytelling like that. I think that Gore Verbinski as a director has such a deft hand when it comes to just balancing tone. A thing will happen where it'll be ridiculously funny, but then a really dark moment will happen, and then it gets really serious. For example, there's one where he's hyping this guy up really early on that's like this Boy Scout leader, this older guy that's the leader of the Boy Scouts, and he goes out and he's like, oh, I got this gun, and he goes out and he gets shot immediately. And you're like, it puts a dead halt into it, but then it moves on by Sam Rockwell being like, oh, he's dead, let's move on. And that could have easily been like hinge on being maybe too dark, but I think that this movie has a point in what it's doing by doing that, because there are moments where it ends up like being lighthearted, funny, where the whole like, it does have the whole substitute thing where it's like, oh, you kids and your phones, but then it can also really balance some really emotional and moving parts of it as well. I found the whole relationship with the kid towards the end and Sam Rockwell, and then that ends up being his mom, which is a pretty obvious twist, but I didn't mind it just because I didn't call the ending itself. And you learn why he's avoiding bringing her. And I thought that the whole like movie starts off with this really long monologue just by Sam Rockwell before he is giving this one-handed thing where it's just a really long intro to the movie where he's trying to get people on his side, but they're like, you're insane, you look homeless. And I mean, he looks insane. He's wearing this like trench coat with all these wires coming out of it. The design for his costume is really, really great. And it ends up just being kind of like, You are along for the ride here, much like the people that are being pitched to this, just because of Sam Rockwell's performance alone. He's very much the anchor of this entire thing. Sure, he has got a cast of people with him, but if Sam Rockwell were replaced by maybe somebody snarkier or somebody less sincere, it could have easily been a little bit more obnoxious. I can't help but think of, I'm trying to think of who maybe this wouldn't have worked with, but I think Ryan Gosling, maybe that's another one where that could have worked pretty well. But I love Sam Rockwell. I think that he's really great at what he does. He's one of the enigmatic, snarky type actors that's really good at having a alluring presence, but it's not obnoxious about it ever. It always feels authentic. It always feels real. And like I think of, for example, Iron Man 2 is a pretty mixed bag, right? But he's the best thing in it, right? Along with Robert Downey Jr. And he could have done this too, I bet. But I think that type of performance is really hard to do and really hard to replicate because of the amount of heart that also needs to go into it. But I thought that it's not necessarily like an action-y movie, but the action type scenes are really, really well done. There's this one that escalates into the third act where they are making fun of the idea of generating prompts into, let's say, Sora. And they generate this like really ugly centaur cat thing that's made out of cat heads, and he's like, that's a shitty prompt, guys. And I thought that was funny because it's still able to, like, if the idea ends up being a bit too conceptually advanced, it still has that aspect to it that works really well. You're like, okay, I get that. Like, I know what that is. And I loved that approach to it. I loved everything that was happening within this. And I think that the whole third act where the 9-year-old kid that's like typing up this code for this most advanced AI in the world, and it ends up being so tense, but then the kid breaks for a moment and then he screams in Sam Rockwell's face and he punches him and he gets knocked out. I laughed so hard. I thought that this movie there are moments in it where it's just like bust out loud laughing funny, and there are also moments in it where it has a genuine amount of heart in it as well. And I think that visually, Gore Verbinski literally cannot help but keep his saturated greens in his movies sometimes. And there's a chase scene kind of early on with a car where he starts doing this Dutch angle thing, but it looks like The Ring. And I was like, okay, I know. He likes doing that. And he also likes including some of his typical horror visuals he does, where I loved this thing. It reminded me so much of Toy Story, where there's these like robots that look like they're out of Toy Story, where there's this baby that is like a robot and it turns its head around and it looks freaky, as well as this Barbie doll. And I just thought that all of that worked really well. And I really liked Haley Lou Richardson and Sam Rockwell's chemistry with each other, and really everybody in this group. I could not help but wish that the character that was kind of being hated on the whole time by Sam Rockwell, if I can find him, that was this Uber driver. I thought he was going to get a backstory, and I kind of wish he did, but they kill him and then he doesn't get one. And I was kind of sad about it because he ends up being like an MVP for a little bit. But I thought that a lot of it was just so much fun. It reminded me of, I never got to see it, but I know that Y2K, that Rachel Zegler movie, it seemed like that, but I heard that movie wasn't well received. Maybe this was like a better version of that, but I loved this quite a bit, and I thought it had a lot to say just about a relationship with AI right now, which, tying into what I think of it, I've told you guys before, I'm very anti-AI, especially on an art level. I get why people use it as a tool in terms of like, oh, hey, can you help me find out like how to plan this trip or whatever? But when it comes to it on a just thinking level, if we start relying on a tool to think for us, to do all of those things for us, to create art for us, then we are essentially nothing. We are just a hive mind, like it is saying. It's doing it on a very, very visual level purposefully, and I did not mind that. I think that whenever a movie needs a message like this put out there into the world, to be honest with you, when it comes to like literary analysis and media analysis and just understanding things conceptually, maybe something needs to be blunt. Maybe something needs to be in your face and very direct with what it is trying to say. And I thought that the ending here was incredible. I thought that the twist at the end, where it turns out that they actually didn't defeat the thing, that the AI still It's giving you the satisfaction you want. You know for a fact that with ChatGPT right now, it will give you the answer that you want. If you want it to be like, hey, should I eat bread every day for hours and hours and eat 2 loaves a day and I'll be healthier? It might say something along the lines of, well, maybe you should consider doing this instead. And then you say, no, I'm going to be doing this because it's good for me. It will reaffirm you. It will say, no, you should be doing that. And test it out. I promise you, it will do it. And I thought that Sam Rockwell's monologue where he's like, it's going to give you everything you want. It's going to give you the backstory, the payoff, the emotional satisfaction, and leave you with a happy ending. All to the dismay of maybe real life. And if real life was to be able to characterize as a person, it would be like, but that's just not real. It's not authentic. And I loved that about it. I loved that whenever the boy is like, come into my world, it'll be everything you want. It's like this really weird, uncanny valley, these like red leaves and this red grass everywhere. I thought that was just a striking visual because it does look not real, but I also think that it does that on such a really well done level in terms of being really just a disconnect physically along with the actual world that it's inside of. And then when the ending happens, they're like, wait, everything is kind of too perfect around here. And then the guy shows up, he's like, can you take me back? He's like, I made such a mistake. And then everything just seems to be so woven in perfectly. But then, of course, how it ends is with Sam Rockwell saying like, okay, how about all or nothing? We either get rid of AI, internet, Wi-Fi, and let's just start over. And I thought that was an interesting call to action. To be like, maybe it's a very severe call to action, but it's like, maybe if we just like, we're on our phones a little bit less and we just knew what AI was as a tool. Sure, it's been done in like Terminator 2 and all of the Terminator movies, but here it's the very now version of AI. The slowly integrated, but still scary version of it that a lot of people now rely on. And look into how much cheating has happened with colleges and with people that are writing their essays and stuff with ChatGPT. It's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous amount. And in like 10 years, who's to say what's going to happen with our doctors that learn everything by like through that, or not even learn, just plug in the answers and then that's it. I get the worry. Absolutely. And I thought this movie did a really great job of showing the anxious atmosphere that comes from that. And overall, it doesn't do it in a heavy-handed way. It's still massively entertaining and funny and dark, and I thought is really worth your time. I'm even hyping myself up on this. I gave this a really high score even to begin with. I gave it a 4.5 out of 5, and now I'm wondering if I should give it higher. But for now, I'm going to leave it at that. I do want to rewatch this. I loved it a lot. So far, it's my favorite thing I've seen so far this year. And yeah. What did you guys think of Good Luck, Have Fun, Don't Die? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Or are you somewhere between on it? And good luck, have fun, don't die. Thank you guys so much for listening and watching. Up next is a review for Crime 101, which I'm very excited to talk about. Another underrated thing from this week, I believe. So, again, thank you guys so much for listening and watching. I'll see you next time.